quick but pretty succinct training on viral story times and the energetics around this. So essentially, those of you who've been following me for a while, and at the time of making this video, I just shared a 2-day story time. And so there's a lot of energetics that go on when I go to share these story times. And this was actually taught to me by a mentor named Hajina. So I want to give her some credit here, but I'm going to kind of really usher in how this is connected to the soulmate client path and whatnot. So the past 2 days, I just shared a story time on how I grew up in a wealthy family. And this was something that it wasn't necessarily a secret, but it was covered in shame. And so I would share it with clients, but a lot of times on my page, I wouldn't put in all the details about it, not to be mischievous, not to lie. Everything was always shared in truth, but there was like another layer to the truth that wanted to come out. And so a lot of times these viral story times, you will get pings around this. And once you start putting intentions of sharing these types of things, you'll start feeling them. I probably share them maybe once a quarter, sometimes less, sometimes more. And so the point of these is to share something that brings light to shame, or anything that you've been hiding behind, or anything that just is meant to be shared that is a little bit, usually these story times are going to be a bit of a transmutation of some sorts. And so the way that I know that it's time to share a story time is usually, to a degree, I might feel some sort of stagnation. It might be getting ready for some sort of launch, which I felt both of these recently. At the time of me making this video, I'm about to be launching Take Flight, my next iteration, and that officially went live yesterday. And so the story time totally played in with this, because I also shared about the storm that I went through in my business this winter. And so if you are watching this way in the future, I just am like so enjoy thinking about all the Butterfly Effect members in the future that I have yet to meet. You'll want to go back to April of 2025. So if you're watching this not far in the future, that's where the story time is. I've also shared other story times surrounding my twin flame relationship. And I've shared also around having a trust fund and like using that term in my video. And so that being said, it's usually sharing something that has some sort of misunderstanding or shame for the most part, or sharing something just vulnerable. And so the importance of these story times is that you will feel some sort of energy around it. And that also, every time I've shared these, I have had people come out of the woodwork, especially when I shared my twin flame story time. I had someone that ended up working with me who said that was the reason they worked with me, was because they realized they were going through something pretty similar, even if it wasn't necessarily twin flame. That being said, I also had so many soulmate clients pop in during that time. So a lot of times this will kind of open up an energy portal in a sense. And so this past one, I had been feeling nudges around it for like the whole last week. And then I did a session called Point Holding, where I moved through I had a huge release, and I realized I kept getting nudges of like, wait for it, you'll get the story time, you'll get it when it's time. And bang, it came through in this session. And so then I knew what to share. And same with the twin flame story time. I had kind of felt it brewing, because my twin flame story is hand in hand with my soul business, because I had a encounter with I essentially had the awakening around my twin flame, but he was someone I used to work with. And that period of time is what sent me into my business. And so it's part of the reason that I move so distinctly, because it's a really big radar for where I'm playing small. And so I was kind of feeling called to share that story. And I was meeting up with a few clients in Costa Rica, and I had this feeling, okay, I said to myself, I had a feeling they were on the twin flame journey. And I said to myself, okay, if I get any nudges while I'm on this Costa Rica trip, whether it was like about them or something else, I'm going to share it. And within the first day, it was confirmed. And so that being said, these story times are going to be in a process of you sharing them. You're going to be transmuting a lot in yourself, and then you're going to be opening a lot of energy in an energy portal. And so some things to think about with these is you want to be eye-catching with the real. You'll notice, especially the twin flame story, if you go back to August of 2024 is where you'll find that. And then the trust fund story in February of 2025, when you go to these, you'll notice that it's pretty, when you read it, it makes you want to read more. I feel like these last two story times were definitely eye-catching. I have a good amount of views on them, but I think those two are really good examples of the eye-catchingness. I did feel called to share in this way more this time, less kind of whoa with the term twin flame and trust fund. But that being said, it's going to be something that feels a little bit like, whoa, that is, something that's judged out of the normal and whatnot. So you want your reel to, I find that with story times, it's awesome to do the shorter few second video and then lead down. I find that verbal storytelling doesn't always really translate in these, in my experience. I've told some of these over messaging as well. I've shared it on LinkedIn where, I didn't have a video. But that being said, typically the shorter, video and then copy is what does well. I share these on TikTok as well. So same thing there. And because then you can lead down into the story, and you want to shape your story time in a way where you kind of, you lead on from the video, but then you open it in a way that's also kind of eye-catching. So I'm actually going to bring up my story. And so this last one, I said, it feels like I haven't been as loud as proud about this as I should be. I grew up in a wealthy family, and if you want to read the rest, but basically I started with this video. I always have the thing everyone desires. It's really eye-catching, right? Because I did grow up in a family where money wasn't really an object. And so that being said, the resource that the world is in fear and scarcity over, and that wars are started from, is what I had. And then yet I lived in suffering. So you want to kind of create this crux that leads people in. So you don't want to just tell it point blank. You want to create some suspension. And this is something that's going to become really natural over time. And what you're going to want to do, and what I find myself doing, is I will kind of feel pings and use my channel to help funnel some of this. That's where I kind of got the ping of, I've always had everything that everyone desires. Because when you look at the world, even online in the coaching industry, everybody, there is this sense of like, okay, money numbers. Of course, in our industry, and from a soul-centered and heart-centered way, it's about the impact. But that being said, there's still a lot of talk of money, and I talk about money on my page. This is a good thing because we're bringing away shame from money. But, the whole world is obsessed, because we're in the survival world, with getting money. And so I've always had that. I didn't start my business for that. God, no. I could have lived off that if I wanted to and lived a very comfortable life. But instead, I decided to transmute it. So I told this whole story. So, yet I lived in suffering. I really played into like, okay, how was I living in suffering? I took jobs where my blood vessels were popping. I had access to funds, yet I stayed in an apartment that was abusive because I didn't want to pay. So kind of just like highlighting. And so what you'll want to do is write down the whole story and then find ways to put these things in. You will find that the first time you write the story, you're going to need to make some adjustments to make it flow. So you want to make something that adds some suspension. There's going to be like a buildup, kind of the drop in, setting the stage, building up, and kind of like leading to the point. You want to create suspension around this. So you'll find, I talked about how my family has always been heart-centered wealth. My family has donated literally tens of millions of dollars to our city. And there's like projects and initiatives. And we started a nonprofit that, my family donates a lot of money to as well. It's public, and then I got into the pieces of myself. So it's like, you want to share, especially in these story times, like this is your time to share about you. Your page is for other people. So you're talking to them. You're saying, you are this, you are this. This is about you. Your story time this is a time for you to share about you and share the things. Of course, you're going to bring it back to people in a way, but you're kind of creating something that is a little bit more just, okay, like what are they getting? They're getting a behind the scenes about you. So you want to share something that is kind of like, whoa, okay. It's almost like a coming out of the closet in the way, even if that's not like 100% the case. And so I really got into, in this video, I'm reading the thing right now, but I really got into how wealth was really clouded by shame, how that didn't actually allow me to do what I was meant to do on this planet, because I was not touching the funds out of fear, out of like the shame of having them. And so talking about all the transmutation, how I'm here to anchor wealth frequency, and doing so, I've transmuted old money to new money. And that's actually a huge part of my mission. So kind of just sharing this glimpse of my life and myself. And so that being said, I also led into a suspension for part 2. So when you go to do your story time, there could be multiple parts, and you'll feel this. So I want you to feel into that when you're going to create your story time. So I want you to think, okay, are there like segments of this story? So if you were to go back to my story time in August of 2024 for the the twin flame story time. I'm going back right now. Because if you were going to go back to that story time, you would notice that it is 4 parts. And here we are. Oh my gosh, we're back. I got to read it again. So the first part, I said, fun fact, a cosmic reconnection with my twin flame activated my psychic gifts through a Kundalini awakening, led me to claiming my destiny as a light worker, going full throttle, and creating a 20K per month business and growing. This is so edgy for me to share, something I've kept really private because I like to protect this journey. 1028 as I look down, which is an angel number. And I said part 1 of 4 parts. So typically with these story times, I will at least have an idea of the 4 chunks. You don't need to get perfectly, but while I was in Costa Rica, I actually just had a night where I just dumped all of this out. And so then I go to part 2 where I say my psychic gifts, which I now use to help radically transform my clients' lives and make money, were activated because I reconnected with my twin flame and had an unexpected Kundalini awakening. And I started having dreams that would happen in real life. And so this is kind of, similar to the first one, but I got into a different nuance. The first one, I talked about how we reconnected and kind of laid the scene for the twin flame connection. But then this one, I got deeper into meeting the coworker and then having the Kundalini awakening and how that went for it. And then this fourth one, I might make a version of this where I share some of these. I said, spoiler alert, if my twin flame didn't ghost the shit out of me, I'm not sure my life would look like 20K months doing work that lights my soul up, client trips to Costa Rica and more. So now I got into the part where the activation into my purpose happened because he completely vanished. And to this day, he has vanished, although we are still very connected. And that being said, then I led into part 4 where I said, I'm so thankful I got ghosted by my twin flame, and so you'll notice in these, I'm continuing to use buzz terms, twin flame. In my other one, I used trust fund a bunch of times too. And there's definitely been more, but these ones are the highlights. So I said, I'm so thankful I got ghosted by my twin flame because now I have a business that makes 20K per month and growing, serving literal soulmate clients all over the world, like this trip to Costa Rica. And just so you guys know, I am using visuals in this as well. And so that being said, you want to have an idea of the structure of your story time, because this can also be a really good way to really deeply engage your listeners. But then also I posted 4 separate videos that got a lot of views and attention. And so this is a really good way to get reach. I've seen people go viral in this, and actually Hajina, who taught this to me, has gone super viral on some of her story times. And so that being said, this is an amazing iteration to sprinkle in. Again, once you start to play with this, you can really kind of do this at any time, but you kind of want to save this in your ammunition for when you're feeling kind of a lull. You're kind of feeling okay, I know something's coming, but why do I feel like it's not quite coming yet? Usually time for a story time. And so I knew this for the past week. I was a lot of times I'll even just get a download now, because I haven't been feeling stagnant necessarily. I just felt like I was in this pause before the storm of launching Take Flight. And so I felt the nudge for this story time and let it come to me. So you'll trust your channel, and you'll know if you're reading this right now, if you're oh my gosh, I feel one of these in me. Perfect. But especially once you nail your soulmate client path, it's going to be, for me, I do have a lot of people on the twin flame journey in my services. And so for me, sharing this twin flame story was huge. I also can feel that there are people who are meant to be in my orbit who grew up in wealth and have trust funds that they're meant to transmute. And so just trusting, that it lives under the same umbrella. And this is a really, really, really potent piece to add to your ammunition. So that being said, storytelling in general is so important. And I have it in some of my other trainings, but this type of storytelling is next level because you're literally opening portals to your soulmate family. So I love you all, and I can't wait to see all of your stories.